364 days left. Chapter 7 minus 358 days left. Sometimes the person you are trying to save is the reason you survived. Day 358. Jungkook remembered the fire. Not clearly. Not enough to call it a memory. It came in pieces. A hallway drowned in smoke. The sharp taste of something bitter in the back of his throat. The sound of an alarm screaming somewhere above him. A hand wrapped tightly around his wrist, pulling him forward while someone shouted his name. And then darkness. Every time he tried to reach for the rest of it, the memory disappeared, like water slipping through his fingers. Jungkook opened his eyes. For several seconds, he didn't know where he was. The ceiling above him slowly came into focus, followed by the familiar cracks near the corner of his bedroom. Morning light pushed through the curtains, pale and cold. His breathing was uneven. He had fallen asleep at some point, though he couldn't remember when. The wooden box sat on his desk, closed, silent, waiting. Jungkook stared at it. The memory from the previous night returned with painful clarity. The photograph, the hospital bracelet, the initials engraved inside the silver medal, J+T, and Taehyung's face when he'd seen it. That was what frightened Jungkook most. Not the fire, not the mysterious messages, not even the countdown. Taehyung had looked at the bracelet as though he'd seen a ghost. Jungkook sat up slowly. There was something Taehyung wasn't telling him. Something connected to that night. Something connected to him. And somehow, the thought of it made Jungkook more afraid than the anonymous messages ever had. His phone vibrated on the bedside table. Jungkook reached for it. For one foolish second, he hoped it might be Jimin. It wasn't. Unknown number. His stomach tightened. He opened the message. You found the first memory. Another message appeared almost immediately. Now find the person who was beside you. Jungkook stared at the words. His thumb hovered over the screen. Then his eyes slowly moved toward the wooden box. He whispered the name before he could stop himself. Taehyung. By the time Jungkook reached the university, he had convinced himself that he was overthinking everything. That was what he told himself anyway. The campus was already crowded. Students hurried between buildings with coffee in their hands. Groups gathered around club notices. And somewhere, near the courtyard, a guitarist was playing the same 3 chords he'd been playing for the past 10 minutes. Normal. Everything was normal. Jungkook desperately wanted to believe that. You've been staring at that tree for 30 seconds. Jimin's voice pulled him back. Jungkook blinked. What? The tree? What about it? You were looking at it like it owed you money. Jungkook glanced at the tree. I was thinking, that's dangerous. Jungkook laughed despite himself. Jimin studied him for another moment. Jungkook blinked. What? The tree? What about it? You were looking at it like it owed you money. Jungkook glanced at the tree. I was thinking, that's dangerous. Jungkook laughed despite himself. Jimin studied him for another moment. The smile slowly disappeared from his face. You didn't sleep again. Jungkook looked away. I slept. For how long? Enough. That's not a number. Jungkook adjusted the strap of his backpack. You sound like my grandmother. Your grandmother has good judgment. Jungkook smiled faintly. She does. He almost told Jimin. The words were there. He could have said everything. Someone is sending me messages. They know about the countdown. They know about the fire. I think I knew Taehyung before we met, but something stopped him. Perhaps it was fear. Perhaps it was the warning. Or perhaps it was the strange feeling that the moment he told someone, the fragile balance around him would collapse. Jimin seemed to understand that there was something he wasn't saying. He didn't push. Instead, he handed Jungkook a small carton of juice. Drink. Jungkook looked at it. What's this? Breakfast. This isn't breakfast. You don't deserve breakfast after making me wait outside for 20 minutes. Jungkook smiled. You're a terrible friend. And yet you keep me. Unfortunately. Exactly. They started walking. For a few minutes, the conversation returned to ordinary things. Assignments, professors, Jimin's obsession with free food. Jungkook almost managed to forget everything. Almost. Then they reached the main building, and Jungkook saw Taehyung. He was standing outside the student council office, holding a folder against his chest. The morning sunlight caught the side of his face. He looked calm, composed, exactly as he always did. But the moment Taehyung noticed Jungkook, his expression changed, only slightly. His eyes narrowed. Then his gaze moved over Jungkook's face. You look tired. Jungkook stopped. So do you. I slept. I didn't. Taehyung's expression softened. I know. Jungkook frowned. How? Taehyung hesitated. Then, with the smallest trace of humor, he said, because you look like you fought with your pillow and lost. Jungkook stared at him, then laughed. A real laugh. The sound surprised even him. Taehyung smiled. Not the polite smile he gave students. Not the brief expression Jungkook had caught during orientation. A genuine one. For a second, Jungkook forgot the message on his phone, forgot the fire, forgot the calendar. There was only the strange warmth of seeing Taehyung smile at him. Then Taehyung's gaze dropped. His eyes settled on Jungkook's wrist. What happened there? Jungkook looked down. A faint reddish mark crossed his skin. He hadn't noticed it before. I don't know. Taehyung's hand moved instinctively toward it. He stopped before touching him. The gesture was so small that Jungkook wondered whether he'd imagined it. You should be careful, Taehyung said quietly. Jungkook looked at him. There was something in Taehyung's voice. Concern, not casual concern. Something deeper. Something that made Jungkook wonder just how long Taehyung had been worried about him. Before he could ask, Jimin appeared between them. Are you two planning to stand here all morning? Jungkook immediately stepped back. No. Taehyung cleared his throat. No. Jimin looked between them suspiciously. Right. He smiled. Very convincing. Their first lecture passed without Jungkook remembering a single thing the professor said. His notebook was open. His pen was in his hand, but his thoughts kept circling back to one sentence. Find the person who was beside you. He looked across the room. Taehyung was writing. His handwriting was impossibly neat, every line straight, every word carefully placed. Jungkook wondered what Taehyung remembered. The previous night, Jungkook had admitted knowing about the fire. Not everything, but enough. Enough to know that Jungkook had been there. Enough to know that Jungkook had been trying to save someone. And enough to know that his grandmother had asked him to keep quiet. Why? Why would Grandma trust Taehyung with something she hadn't told Jungkook? Jungkook stared at the back of Taehyung's head. As if sensing his gaze, Taehyung turned. Their eyes met. Jungkook quickly looked down. His heart was beating strangely fast. He didn't understand why. At lunch, Jungkook didn't eat much. He sat beneath a tree behind the humanities building while Jimin complained about an upcoming assignment. You've been quiet all day. I'm listening. No, you're pretending to listen. Jungkook poked at his food. No aside. Whatever is happening. Jungkook looked up. You can tell me. There was no teasing in his voice this time. Taehyung stared at his friend. Jimin continued quietly. You don't have to protect everyone from everything. Jungkook swallowed. I'm not protecting anyone. You are. Jimin leaned back against the tree. You always do that. Jungkook looked away. He remembered his grandmother's letter. Don't blame yourself. He remembered the unknown message. Find the person who was beside you. And then he remembered Taehyung catching him in the archive. For some reason, the memory felt strangely safe. I just don't know who I can trust, Jungkook admitted. Jimin was silent. Then he said, start with the people who haven't given you a reason not to. Jungkook looked at him. Jimin smiled. That includes me. Jungkook laughed softly. I know. That afternoon, Jungkook received another message. He was alone when it arrived. He was standing outside the library, waiting for Taehyung. The phone vibrated. Unknown number. He opened it. Your grandmother has what you need. Jungkook's expression changed. Another message followed. But she isn't the only one keeping secrets. His heart sank. He immediately called Grandma. No answer. He tried again. Still nothing. A third time. Nothing. Jungkook stared at the screen. Something was wrong. He turned toward the library. Taehyung was walking toward him. Everything okay? Jungkook shook his head. I'm going to Grandma's. Taehyung stopped. Why? She isn't answering. I'll come with you. Jungkook hesitated. You don't have to. I know. Then why are you coming? Taehyung looked at him for a moment. Because I want to. There was nothing dramatic about the words. Taehyung simply said them. Yet somehow they stayed with Jungkook. He nodded. Okay. The house was quiet when they arrived. Too quiet. Jungkook pushed open the front gate. Grandma? No answer. He knocked. Nothing. The front door wasn't locked. Jungkook exchanged a glance with Ren. They stepped inside. Everything appeared normal. The familiar clock on the wall, the old photographs, the small vase of flowers Grandma always kept near the window. But something felt wrong. Jungkook couldn't explain it. He walked toward the living room, then stopped. The wooden box was sitting on the dining table. His wooden box. The one he'd left in his bedroom. Jungkook's face went pale. I left that upstairs. Taehyung looked at him. Are you sure? Yes. Jungkook approached it slowly. He picked it up. Something rattled inside. Both boys froze. Jungkook shook it gently. There it was again. A faint metallic sound. His fingers tightened around the box. I didn't hear anything inside before. Taehyung stared at it. Maybe you weren't supposed to. Jungkook looked at him. What does that mean? Taehyung didn't answer. Jungkook turned the box over. There, hidden beneath a small wooden panel, was a tiny keyhole. His breath caught. A key. He reached into his pocket. For a moment, he didn't know why. Then he remembered the silver key he'd found hidden inside Grandma's photograph album. He had taken it without knowing why. Now it suddenly made sense. Jungkook inserted the key. Click. The lid opened. Neither of them moved. Inside was a photograph, a hospital bracelet, and a folded piece of paper. Jungkook reached for the photograph first. His fingers trembled. The image showed a hospital corridor. Two people stood beside one another. One was Jungkook. The other was Taehyung. Jungkook stared. The date printed in the corner made his stomach drop. August 13, 2025. The day after the fire. He looked at Taehyung. Taehyung had gone completely still. His voice failed. Jungkook looked back at the photograph. You knew me. Taehyung didn't answer. You knew me before university. Still nothing. Jungkook's chest tightened. Mr. President. Taehyung finally looked at him. I don't remember this. Jungkook's voice broke. But you do remember the fire. Taehyung lowered his eyes. Yes. The word was barely audible. Jungkook stepped back. How long? I don't know. That's not an answer. I remember pieces. Then tell me. Taehyung looked at the photograph. I remember the hospital. Jungkook's eyes filled with confusion. I remember your grandmother. What did she say? She said you might never remember what happened. Jungkook stared at him. And you just agreed to keep it from me? Taehyung's expression tightened. She asked me to. You should have told me. I wanted to. Then why didn't you? Taehyung looked at him. For the first time, Jungkook saw something unguarded in his eyes. Fear. I was afraid. Jungkook's anger faltered. Of what? Of what would happen if you remembered? Silence filled the room. Jungkook looked down at the hospital bracelet. His name was printed clearly. Jeon Jungkook. Underneath it was another name, but most of the ink had been scratched away. Jungkook turned the bracelet over. A message had been written on the back. Survivor 01. His hands began shaking. Survivor? Taehyung stepped closer. Jungkook. Suddenly, pain shot through Jungkook's head. The room disappeared. For one brief moment, he was somewhere else. Smoke, heat, a corridor, his own hand gripping someone else's. Someone was crying. Someone was shouting. And then, Taehyung's voice. Don't let go. Jungkook gasped. The vision vanished. He stumbled. Taehyung caught him. Jungkook. Jungkook stared at him. His breathing was uneven. You were there. Taehyung didn't deny it. You were there. I was. You knew me. Yes. Why can't I remember? Taehyung's expression broke. I don't know. Jungkook pulled away. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then something crashed upstairs. Both turned toward the ceiling. A door creaked. Jungkook's heart began pounding. Someone's here. Taehyung immediately moved in front of him. Stay behind me. Jungkook stared at his back. It was strange. They had known each other for barely a few weeks. Yet Taehyung stood there as though protecting Jungkook was something he'd done many times before. They slowly climbed the stairs. The hallway was empty. One bedroom door stood open. Jungkook's grandmother's room. Inside, an old photo album lay scattered across the floor. Pages had been torn out. Jungkook rushed forward. He picked up the nearest photograph. 3 young people stood in front of Hanwha University. Jungkook, Taehyung, and a third boy. Someone Jungkook didn't recognize. His face was familiar somehow. Not familiar, like a stranger he'd seen around campus. Familiar like a memory buried too deeply to reach. Jungkook turned the photograph over. Words had been written on the back. If the 3 of you meet again, the countdown begins. Jungkook's blood ran cold. 3 of us. Taehyung took the photograph from him. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then quietly, the boy in that photograph, he opened his eyes, was the reason the fire started. Jungkook felt the room tilt beneath him. Before he could ask another question, Taehyung added something even more terrifying. He was supposed to be dead. Across the street, a dark car remained parked beneath the trees. Inside, The hooded figure watched the upstairs window. The person beside them glanced toward the house. They found the photograph. I know. Should we stop them? The hooded figure shook their head. No. If they discover everything, they will. The driver turned toward them. Then why let it happen? For a long moment, the hooded figure remained silent. Then they looked at the photograph of Jungkook on the dashboard. Because this time, their voice softened. He deserves to know why he survived. The car pulled away from the curb. Behind them, the university tower clock struck midnight. Somewhere inside Jungkook's room, the small desk calendar sat untouched. The page still read, 358 days left. But beneath it, hidden from everyone, was another page. A page that had already been marked with a single date. Day 0 August 12, 2026. And beneath the date, written in faded ink, were 4 words. One of them lies. To be continued. Thanks, armies. Thank you for reading it. Don't forget to like, comment, and hit the subscribe button. Your small effort will boost me up for next part.